Tonight on the Readout.
Crazy Nancy Pelosi, the whole thing, just boom, boom, boom. They said we have to take the bow and we have to make it a little nicer and a little point at the top instead of a flat nose. And the people at the shipyard said, this guy sort of knows what he's doing. We have the most beautiful ships, right? Has anyone seen Silence of the Lambs? The late, great Hannibal Lecter. He'd love to have you for dinner.
He's real. People are worried about Biden's age, but what about his opponent? Trump gave another rambling, unhinged performance last night. Shouldn't we be asking, is he okay? Plus, as promised, we will continue to expose Project 2025, whose dangerous policies fueled a lot of the extreme rhetoric at the Republican National Convention. And we begin tonight with the key takeaway from the Republican National Convention as a whole event, what you might call a 4-day manstravaganza, where what on the right passes for manly politics, along with the abject, supine, kneeling worship of Donald Trump, which of course is not exactly the manliest thing a guy could do, all reign supreme. And that takeaway is that Trump is far from unbeatable. He's actually an extremely flawed candidate. Today, President Biden released a statement on Trump's speech, which, of course, was the finale of the RNC convention, saying, quote, last night, the American people saw the same Donald Trump they rejected 4 years ago. For over 90 minutes, he focused on his own grievances with no plan to unite us and no plan to make life better for working people. He avoided mentioning his Project 2025 agenda, but still proudly flaunted the worst of MAGA extremism. Biden also said he looks forward to getting back on the campaign trail next week. Trump's big campaign moment last night followed an introduction from the Ultimate Fighting Championship chief Dana White, infamous for getting caught on tape slapping his wife during a New Year's party. And a shirt-ripping endorsement from Hulk Hogan, the longtime WWE character, now infamous for dropping F-bombs and suing Gawker out of existence with billionaire Peter Thiel's money. But needless to say, Trump really dug their presentations. And there was also failed rapper turned some kind of musician or other, MAGA character, Kid Rock. After the intros, Trump made a dramatic entrance, strutting onto the stage with his last name emblazoned behind him in bright, tacky lights. And he delivered what was essentially a rally speech, a bizarre and boring stream of consciousness rant full of lies, complaints, and xenophobia. All of this, despite Trump and some in the media assuring us that he was a changed man, seeking, what was it again? Oh, yes, unity. My colleagues and I, we all had the speech in front of us last night, okay? And the audience could also see the speech in this big teleprompter. So we were trying to follow along as Trump veered off script and deep into a rambling series of lies that stretched the speech from a time like maybe 25 minutes to more than 90. Journalists in the room reported that as Trump just banged on and on, audience members were checking their phones, stealing glances at the teleprompters, slumping in their chairs, and even falling asleep. Some even left. I mean, the guy droned on for 90 minutes. Just imagine with me for a moment. If Joe Biden gave a rambling speech like Trump did last night, it would be the biggest story of the year. There would be almost nothing else on the front pages of every newspaper in this country and little else on cable and broadcast news. There has been a lot of ink spilled on Biden for doing far, far less. So why are we not talking about Trump the same way we talk about Biden? His unhinged performance is somehow normalized or acceptable because he's always like that? Well, why is he always like that? We have to have a real conversation about Trump's mental acuity. Because last night, Trump showed that there are two old men in this race, but only one of them sounds like a meandering Fidel Castro who gave famously endless speeches, including remarks in 1960 that went on for 4 hours at the United Nations. Maybe we in the media should show Trump more? I mean, I'm serious. I know that all of you, that all of you have Trump fatigue. We all have Trump fatigue, and we all struggle, including on this network, with how responsible it would be to show a stream of lies to you. But maybe, just maybe, we have to keep showing the American public that this is a man whose cognitive health is definitely in question, if this is what he's like every time he gives a speech. It is more serious than Biden, guys. Yes, Biden is aging. He shuffles when he walks and forgets names and makes gaffes. But he's not incoherent. He can give us a prompter speech. He can go 90 minutes in a live press conference showing a command of foreign policy. Can you imagine Trump doing that? Trump last night, it's just on a different level. Let me just show you an apples to apples comparison so you can be the judge. You can be the judge.
I believe the American consensus from Truman to Reagan to me still holds today. America cannot retreat from the world. We must lead the world.
You know, it's nice to get along with somebody who has a lot of nuclear weapons or otherwise, isn't it?
And I, honest to God, have never been more optimistic about America's future if we stick together.
We will have our next Republican convention in Venezuela because it will be safe.
Now, just because we must lower the temperature in our politics and relate to violence, it doesn't mean we should stop telling the truth. Who you are, what you've done, what you'll do, that's fair game.
Has anyone seen Silence of the Lambs? The late, great Hannibal Lecter. He'd love to have you for dinner.
I'm telling you, he thinks Hannibal Lecter is real and still alive. I swear he does. And yet, with all that you just heard, it is Biden who is fighting off calls from within his own party to step down. There are now more than 30 congressional members, more than 10% of the Democratic caucus in the House and Senate calling for Biden to exit the election. The pressure campaign is reportedly also coming from the highest echelons of the Democratic establishment, including Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, and per some reports, even Biden's former White House partner, President Barack Obama. NBC News has learned that in the midst of all of that pressure campaign, members of Biden's family have discussed what an exit from the race would look like if he chooses to give in. And that's still a big if, with Biden's campaign pushing back hard against that possibility. In a new memo, they insist that Biden is in it to win it and will remain at the top of the ticket. Quote, he is the presumptive nominee. There is no plan for an alternative nominee. In a few short weeks, Joe Biden will be the official nominee. Folks, they said it is high past time that we stop fighting each other. The only person who can win when we fight is Donald Trump. That's the end of the statement. So if nothing else, Democrats need to recognize the truth in that last line. Given Trump's performance last night, the focus really should be on him, no? Democrats need to realize that the person that they are so terrified of is not some great unbeatable political colossus. Last night, he seemed more like a cognitively diminished old vaudeville performer doing his act for the nurses at the old folks' home. I'm joined now by Jelani Cobb, MSNBC political contributor, staff writer for The New Yorker, and dean of the Columbia Journalism School. Molly Jong-Fast, special correspondent for Vanity Fair and host of the Fast Politics podcast. And Aaron Rupar, independent journalist and publisher of the Public Notice newsletter. Aaron, I have been meaning to get you onto this show. I do not look on that demon app anymore, except I do go to your feed whenever there's a Trump rally, because I don't want to watch it. I'm being honest. I don't know that I want to sit through it, but I follow your feed, and that's how a lot of people are actually experience Trump rallies. So you watch them so we don't have to, and we appreciate you for it. Was what you saw last night typical of the way that Trump's rallies play out?
It was, with the exception that he spent, about 20 to 30 minutes at the top recounting in painstaking detail the assassination attempt, which was obviously very different from a normal rally speech. And then he had another 20 minutes or so of acknowledgments. So by the time he actually got to the rally speech, he was 40 minutes in, and that ended up, being the main reason that the speech ended up going past an hour and a half. And, one of the things that's always really notable to me after Trump does a speech like this is logging onto social media and seeing people who don't pay close attention to him kind of appalled at his state, at how incoherent he is, how rambling his speeches are, how boring they are. And to me, I posted the Jack Nicholson meme of him nodding with a smile because this is what they are. I mean, this has been Trump going back at least to 2018. His speeches have barely changed, and last night was another illustration of that. And
did you have a copy of the speech? Did you have a written copy of it while were you following along with it, or were you just experiencing it in real time?
I went in cold, and I saw some reporters pointing out today that there were a number of prominent national papers that reported on his speech based on the prepared remarks. And so I saw in the Boston Globe, for instance, their headline was something to the effect of Trump emphasizes unity in speech. And so, he kind of ended up playing the media in that respect.
Oh, totally.
I was very skeptical as news was circulating yesterday in the day that this was going to be a different Trump, that he was going to emphasize unity, not be divisive. And I think what he ended up doing is actually reminding people of a lot of the reasons that they were turned off by him in the first place. He mentioned the China virus at one point, which I think should have given people flashbacks to his press conferences in 2020 during COVID. He talked about his endorsement from Kim Jong-un. And I don't think that's something that a lot of Americans really think is worth touting. He dipped into election denialism, talked about how Democrats cheat on elections, which is obviously a lie. And so, I think if you would have just stopped the speech about a half an hour in, there might have been something to be said for this is a different Trump. He was more somber. But, we basically got the full gamut of Trump, including the full rally speech. And so I think what he ended up doing inadvertently is probably reminding a lot of people of the reasons they didn't like him in the first place.
Yeah, and I had this is a Democratic strategist, but they were a political strategist text during it to me, his team will never let him give another speech again. I mean, the thing about it is, and this is the playing the media piece, I want to come to you, Angelani, because I am not surprised by that. I hate to say I'm disappointed in our industry, but I'm not surprised that they would just take the text of the speech. The text of the speech, at least the first third of it, was, the first part of it was about the shooting. And he read it in a way that was very somber. And then after he got, it was sort of messianic the way it was written. But even the actual written speech, the second third of it, was red meat. It was anti-immigrant screeds. It was really nasty about, it didn't name Joe Biden. It didn't name anyone in particular. There was no Nancy Pelosi. There was no crazy Nancy Pelosi. But the second third of that speech was no different than a normal Trump thing. But the other piece I noticed performatively, he was bored after he got out of the part. He didn't want to stay on the speech. It was clear that he was low energy until he did his shtick. The media, to me, appears to be failing because this is not being interrogated.
Oh, no, it's totally not. And so there was a divide. I was actually going back through the coverage of it, and there was a divide between I think serene was the word that people used. There were all these spiritual adjectives that people were trotting out. It was almost as if there was a prefabricated idea of who he was that had been seeded before, because you heard from the campaign, he's a changed person.
That's
even
right.
24 hours later.
He was repeating that.
Right, you were hearing this echoing around, and then it was I was like, did they not hear the rest of the speech? And then it was like, oh, okay, no, they're going from the prepared remarks. And so, that's exactly what you got. And nonetheless, there's still a fundamental unwillingness to grapple with the potential danger of what this situation represents. And you've seen that underestimated time and time again across the board from lots of media organizations. I
mean, somebody who I shall not name compared him to Barack Obama. And I don't know why that person is. Let me read a little bit from The Guardian and move on. From The Guardian, the media has been breathlessly attacking Biden. What about Trump? One journalist, Jennifer Schultz, counted New York Times stories related to Biden's age in the week following the debate. She counted a staggering 192 news and opinion pieces compared with 92 stories on Trump. And that was in a week when the U.S. Supreme Court had ruled that he has immunity for official acts. Almost half of the Trump stories were about the SCOTUS immunity ruling. Just one was about Trump calling for military tribunals for his opponents. None of the stories focused on Trump's mental fitness. Molly, it seems to me that the media writ large, not everybody, because there are people who do focus on it. We try to focus on it here at MSNBC Primetime, but they're pricing in what otherwise would be called clear cognitive decline.
Yeah, and that column is written by Margaret Sullivan, a colleague of yours, a mentor of mine, one of the great media critics of all time, used to be the public editor at the New York Times, and what she said is totally right. Look, they're treating these two candidates as if they are the same. We know Donald Trump, right, indicted, was found guilty, impeached twice. I mean, they tried to, have his followers do January 6th and disrupt the peaceful transfer of power. This is not a normal candidate, right? And he's not even advertising as a normal candidate. He's an autocrat. He wants to be an autocrat. He wants to be a dictator on day one. And yet the media cannot get out of this framing, right? The framing that these two are the same. And you see it everywhere. The thing that gets me the most irritated is that they take him at his word all the time. This is a known liar, so we're going to take him at his word. And with the campaign, too, where the campaign says his tone is new, and so journalists are like, perhaps his tone is new. It's been 8 years.
Yeah. Or he says, I know nothing about Project 2025.
Right.
And they say, he knows nothing about Project 2025.
Right, and they run that in the title.
Yeah.
When in fact, he has people, the person who created the RNC platform is a person who worked on Project 2025.
Well, there you go. Aaron, where do you come down on this question? Because we struggle with it. I'll be honest with you on this show. Showing a Trump rally would be showing a stream of lies to our viewers that we would then have to attempt to fact check. But once something is said, once a lie is out on TV, it gets a sort of gravitas just from having been on TV. Where do you come down on this question? Because to me, one of the values of last night, one of the valuable things that happened last night is that people who don't normally watch Trump actually got to experience how off the rocker he is. Maybe, should we show him more? What do you think?
I think it's probably unwise for a network like yours to carry Trump live for the reasons that you touched upon, just the fire hose of lies. And, I saw this a lot this week on mainstream networks where at the RNC, they were interviewing a lot of Republicans, and Trump Republicans were lying so quickly that it becomes very difficult to fact check. But I think also last night really spoke to something that I'm finding quite interesting in this cycle, which is that by and large, Trump rallies these days, I think in some ways do him more harm than good, because they end up creating these clips of him being totally unhinged and sounding deranged and lying that end up circulating on mainstream social media channels or being clipped up, on your network or others, and really look bad for him. And I think kind of ironically, the rally that probably did him the most political good was the one where someone shot at him, because it produced the image of him, with a fist in the air bleeding that obviously was shown heavily last night as well and has become kind of like a theme for the Trump campaign. But I think what we saw last night is the reason that I think these rallies, more so than ever before, are actually doing Trump more harm than good.
Yeah, it didn't make the Secret Service look too good. They weren't really doing a great job protecting him. Where do you come down on this as the dean of the Columbia School of Journalism? Should we show, don't show?
No. I mean, I think that you do this in a very select and judicious way. But the thing that really needs to be reported on comprehensively is, what happened before. There is a track record here.
Yeah.
And so what happened during the course of that administration was that there was the fire hose effect, not just of mendacity, but all sorts of bizarre things happening. People who've forgotten about the injecting bleach, the entire spectrum of things that happened during those 4 years.
Yeah.
That the public does not have at the forefront of their minds. And I think that's the kind of excavation that really needs to happen. Like, let's talk. You say you're going to do this thing and this thing and this. What happened the last time you were in office? The other thing to say about this is there really needs to be more explication of Project 2025.
Absolutely.
And the reason that's so important is if you remember early on in the Trump phenomenon, where there were still people who were very kind of standoffish toward him. They didn't think that they thought he was a buffoon and so on. And what he used to get them on board was just simply saying, I will appoint these people to the Supreme Court. I will do this. I will do this. That was what enabled them to swallow the pill of Trump. Project 2025 is supposed to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Like for people who are going like, oh, he did this, for people who have a bad taste in their mouth for the things that he did previously, well, look at all of this. It's a Christmas list. We can get all of these things if you can just turn askance at the fact that we may destroy democracy in the midst.
And it's giving Ronald Reagan, because they would be doing it while he's either golfing or off watching Shark Week, or actually scared of sharks, or like watching Hannibal Lecter.
Well, and remember, they did this very thing for Ronald Reagan, and this was the model. And I have to tell you, the stuff in there, I just did a YouTube series on it. It is, they're going to get rid of the Department of Education, Health and Human Services, the weather. You're not going to, climate, it's
terrifying.
Yeah.
We are going to be digging into it. Alicia Keys tweeted about it. My son was like, Alicia Keys tweeted that you're going to be talking about Project 2025. Oh, they're so excited. We are going to be doing that. We have a whole lot on it tonight because we're now back in shows, and we're going to keep doing it. Aaron Rupar, thank you very much. It's great to have you. Please come back. Jelani and Molly are sticking with us because we are going to break down the state of the race and also Biden's latest comments. And later, we will get some of the outstanding questions following the Republican Party's week-long manosphere.
Biden and the Democrats are doing everything they can to tear down this great country and rebuild it in their woke, radical image.
This fringe agenda includes biological males competing against girls and the sexualization and indoctrination of our children.
Every day, Americans are dying, murdered, assaulted, raped by illegal immigrants that the Democrats have released. Teenage girls and boys wearing colored wristbands are being sold into a life of sex slavery.
We become totally unhinged if Donald Trump is not elected in November.
Well, the unhinged part is actually accurate. Well, so much for unity. That was just a little taste of the dark dystopian, fake masculine, anti-LGBTQ, anti-immigrant vision of America that we heard over the course of the past 4 days from the Republican Party, all of which can be boiled down to two words: Project 2025. Joining me now, Basil Smikle, Democratic strategist and MSNBC political analyst, and Joan Walsh, national affairs correspondent for The Nation. Thank you, friends. I appreciate y'all being here. Let me just get your thoughts on all that you saw in Ladies First.
Ladies first.
I mean, because ladies were not first at that convention.
No, absolutely
It was not about women at all.
No, it was doubling.
Were you surprised, by the way, that abortion not mentioned at all?
It's not popular. They got what they wanted. They're going to keep taking it, and it's not popular, so that's off the table for discussion.
Yeah.
But what I think is so interesting, when he picked J.D. Vance, I was like, it's the He-Man woman haters club.
Yeah.
Doubling down on misogyny. I mean, the things that J.D. Vance has said, criticizing women who leave violent marriages because they should have stayed together for the children, or they should have stayed together like his wacky grandparents did, completely against abortion under any circumstances, against subsidized daycare, because you're subsidizing something that normal people don't want. Normal people meaning the wife stays home.
Right.
So, I mean, the level of misogyny that Trump embodies, J.D. Vance expresses in policy ways, has a very serious policy agenda that's anti-women. So that was freakish to me. Mass deportations now as a fun sign to
and
wave.
they could drop balloons on it.
Yeah,
it was fun for everybody.
That was really fun.
Let me play a little sound mash, because there was sort of a manosphere. It was sort of like the manosphere that people aren't familiar with it. It's on YouTube. All these YouTubers who are like man-tubers, and it's all about bringing the country back to like the 50s where the men are in charge. Here is a little taste of the entertainment.
They tried to kill the next president of the United States. Enough was enough. And I said, let Trumpomania run wild, brother. Let Trumpomania rule again. Say fight, fight. Say fight, fight. Say fight, fight.
Let me be very clear. If you are a man in this country and you don't vote for Donald Trump, you're not a man. I mean, who are you? You're not going to vote for that? I mean...
Okay, Basil, the thing about the kind of the conservative Republican version of manliness is that it is supine in its obedience to Donald Trump.
Right.
So it's a man that's taking the knee and then being macho by hating women.
It's a toxic masculinity. There's no question about it. The Hulk Hogan thing, I was like, really? My God. That's
He's like 80. I don't want to have like an 80-year-old ribbon on his shirt.
That's right. That's just And the funny thing is, actually the tragic thing, is if I showed as a black man any level of that kind of confidence, I'd be considered uppity
and aggressive
and
dangerous.
And they'd be a noose ready for me.
Right.
Back in the days that they're trying to take us back
to the point that you made, when the black man who was the most sort of prominent, who showed himself off, was Tim Scott.
That's right.
But he didn't do that kind of masculinity.
Absolutely
he did
not.
sort of a bug-eyed sort of vaudeville act.
That is exactly right. Let me talk about the misogyny, because you know how deep it gets, and I was talking about this the other day. There is a national plan to get rid of no-fault divorces.
Mm-hmm.
How crazy is that? 50 states now have them. This is a way for these men who want to push this to keep women potentially in abusive relationships. That's why we have no-fault divorces, so it made it easier for women to get out of those situations.
And by the way, Donald Trump's whole lifestyle would be impossible without nobody.
That's exactly right.
But here's the thing, Joan. I mean, you wrote a great book. I always tout it. It's called "What's the Matter with White People?" Which what it did was it talked about the way that sort of white men have been conditioned, right, into a kind of politics that doesn't necessarily help them economically. But here's the thing that's interesting. People forget what Joe Biden's superpower was in 2020. Here's 2016 versus 2020, how white men voted. Hillary Clinton only got 32% of white men. Trump got 62%. You take that to 4 years later, Trump gets 57%, Biden got 40. That's part of the reason that Trump was so afraid of him, and it's one of the reasons that they despise him. He's actually dangerous. He's basically the real J.D. Vance.
He's the real J.D. Vance. He's getting that voter back, or at least some of those voters, even the white non-college educated white men.
That's who he is.
Yeah.
He's college educated,
right,
but he comes from them, right?
He comes from them.
And didn't write a book dissing them.
No. A book that dripped with condescension to the people who raised him and got him out of, got him to where he is now. I guess that's Peter Thiel.
Yeah.
Who got him to where he is now.
There he is.
That's why the freak out is so disturbing, because it's not like those voters are going to go, that don't like what they're seeing now, are going to go right to Donald Trump. They want to find a way to stay with Joe Biden.
Right.
So the Democratic Party just needs to show these signs of strength, not this constant freak out that they're doing.
Yeah.
And I think what Joe Biden has done, and I've been saying this, he's got 3,894 delegates. And he's like, come get them. You want them? Come get them. They're mine. And I'm keeping them. And you know what? To me, that's a sign of strength. And that's a sign of vitality. And that's a sign that he wants this and he's in this. And why is there this creation of these stumbling blocks to just make him look weak, make the party look weak, because all we're doing is sending voters away.
Yeah.
When they actually want to stay with us.
Yeah.
Right.
And the other piece of it is the sort of diss to a woman.
That is
on this side, on the Democratic side as well.
Yeah, because that is the most disturbing. And I saw you had Latasha Brown on, and I think that there's an enormous anger. There's a fear of putting her in a position where she loses.
That too.
But she cannot be passed over. And you will see a ferocity should President Biden decide to do the right thing for himself, for the country, and step aside. He would have to endorse her immediately, and then you might see people falling back in line, falling in love.
Yeah, otherwise it'll be civil war in the Democratic Party. I can tell you that. Don't go anywhere. Basil and Joan are sticking around, because guess what we're going to do? We're going to play our favorite game, because you know what? Even when times are terrible, somebody won the week. And for more on Republicans' extreme policies and how Project 2025 promises to upend our republic, go to msnbc.com/readoutproject2025, where we are breaking down that horrid document one topic at a time. And we're going to continue to do so until the election.